Good afternoon to everyone, Your Excellency, ladies and gentlemen, dear colleagues. Welcome. I am Budimir Nikic, Director of the Media Center, and we shall continue the debate. And it is the EU proposal for the normalization of relations between Kosovo and Serbia. With the support of UNMIC, it shall be organized at Media Center. EU proposal is derived from the German and France. And we have Jan Rode here. Welcome, and I wish you a new social initiative. Welcome, and the Director of Kosovo Institute for Research and Development of Policies. Your Excellencies, Rakic, Andrić, Mr. Peci, thank you very much that you are here to talk about this important topic. I believe that we shall learn a bit more as to how the implementation of this proposal, agreement, whatever we call it, will impact in the stabilization of relations between Kosovo and Serbia, how it shall impact in the relations between communities in Kosovo, and strengthening of that inter-ethnic reconciliation, and what are the main challenges of implementing the European proposal, and what are the negative sides if the parties do not admit it and do not implement it. So Belgrade and Pristina have accepted it on the 18th of March to implement that agreement. That no paper has been signed yet, so that's not that very important at the time. So it is an obliging document for both parties. Your Excellency, Ambassador, we shall start from you. How shall the implementation of EU proposal, in fact what was agreed in Ohrid, shall impact in the relations between communities, ethnicities in Kosovo, and strengthening of trust between ethnic communities? And what is it that both parties can expect if this time they do not implement what they have accepted, in fact what they have agreed upon?
Thank you. First of all, thank you very much for inviting me and inviting also my German colleague. I think it is an appropriate time to have this discussion. Thank you for making it a French-German event. I think it's important in terms of substance, but also important in terms of symbol. And also, as I said, the time is very well chosen, because we are at a juncture that is important, that has the potential to develop very well. We're in this closed room, but if we look outside, we can see that spring is coming. Trees are blossoming, the grass is greener, and also in the dialogue, after a winter that has been tense and cold, I think we see the signs of a possibility of a spring in terms of the dialogue between Serbia and Kosovo, as facilitated by the EU. Both the agreements, the agreement on the 27th of February and the agreement in Ohrid on the 18th of March, are a milestone. They are a breakthrough in any case. And we were successful, and the leaders were successful also in making good progress. As you said very well, the fact whether it's signed or not signed is not so important. We find that this agreement is binding, and we consider it as binding towards the EU, both when it comes to Serbia and when it comes to Kosovo. So we expect the leaders of both countries to respect their commitments. And as you've pointed at, there will be consequences if if these commitments are not respected. But I think it is premature to try and say what kind of consequences. We want to concentrate on the positive side. We are on a positive dynamic, and we want to do everything to make this dynamic materialize, because that's exactly now what we're expecting from both leaders, and also in first place, I would say, from the government of the Republic of Kosovo. We expect them to launch negotiations on the association, on the ASMM, on the Association of Serbian Majority Municipalities, as stated in the documents that have been agreed. That's very much the first step. There will be meetings also in the coming days, and we really expect them to again abide by their commitments. And I would also like to pick up what you've said about the relations between the communities and the life for ordinary people, because that's something that is often neglected or not looked at. I think that this period of tension we had, sometimes very tough tensions, impacted first and foremost the ordinary people living, especially in the four northern municipalities. When I say ordinary people, you understand what I mean. I mean people that are not, whose job is not in the politics, people who have their normal life outside of it. They were the ones suffering most from these tensions, and I think it would be very much in their interest if this positive dynamic is continued, if we can materialize not just the ASMM, but also, as stated in the agreement of February, that diplomas, that documents, that symbols put on documents and diplomas would be recognized. That would make the life of everybody much easier. And in the first place, the people living in the Serbian community, and in the very, very first place, the people living in the north. I think I will stop at this on this one, leaving my colleague maybe to comment.
Hvala.
Thank you, Mr. Ambassador Rodney. What are, according to you, the first steps that Pristina and Belgrade should make when it comes to the implementation of EU proposal? And what is the guarantee that this agreement shall not be like the Brussels Agreement of 2013, which has not been implemented in full for 13 years?
Thank you very much. I'm also happy to be here, together also with two representatives of Kosovo civil society. I think, I can't give guarantees, but I am, like my French colleague, much more optimistic, because we have seen now, a short intervals between meetings. On the 27th of February, there was the agreement. On the 19th of March, or 18th of March in Ohrid, there was agreement on the implementation. Next week, we have another meeting in Brussels to get the details. Then there might be soon leaders meeting. But for me, the most important thing is there is the highest political attention in Europe on this. I mean, you have seen recently at the Munich Security Conference where Chancellor Scholz and President Macron met President Vucic. They also met with the Prime Minister of Kosovo. And the message is clear. Also recently outlined in a op-ed by the closest advisors of President Macron, Chancellor Scholz, and the Italian Prime Minister, it's decision time. There is no time to be wasted anymore. We have a war in Europe, and please don't bother us with license plate issues. And the main thing for me is also we have an agreement, And now there's the political will of the stakeholders to implement that. And when, on the Kosovo side, Olivier, my French colleague, mentioned it, it's the ASMM. It has to be implemented. It's a long-term obligation of Kosovo. And on the other side, we need to recognize, which is in the agreement, the symbols. No more objection when it comes to joining Kosovo international organizations. So we need the political will to implement. And, and I hope the meeting next week sets the stage. And when I read today, cars are burned in the north by people who just change license plates. We are in the 21st century. How can you burn cars? When I went 2 weeks ago twice to Jarinje to go skiing at Kapaunic, why do you need to wait 1 or 1.5 hours when you enter? Most of the people who enter are commuters between the north of Kosovo and, Rashka. And, people, citizens' life need to be made easier. And that's the most important thing, and that's, I think, the political responsibility of the stakeholders. And that's why I'm more optimistic, because Europe is really focused on that now. Thank you.
Hvala.
Thank you, Your Excellency. Ambassadors are optimistic. Let us hear now Ms. Racic-Andrić and Ljulzim Peci. Ms. Racic, how do you understand these proposals from Brussels, the implementation of the agreement that leads towards the normalization and the carrot and stick politics towards the parties in the dialogue, that whether there shall be consequences if parties do not fulfill their obligations? And how do you assess this agreement in general?
Hvala na pozivu. Pa što se tiče konkretno tih poruka koje se odnose na neophodnost provođenja sporazuma, meni nažalost signaliziraju da posrednici...
It's all right now. The messages that are sent by international community, they have not changed in relation to what we had before reaching the agreement, and they signal that the parties are not that convinced on the agreement that was held. If we listen to the first messages that come from the West, it is that parties have to fulfill their obligations, and it signals me that they are not completely convinced that it will happen quickly and it will be implemented slowly. And I think that it was not that clever to proclaim the annex as finished. It would have been much better to say somewhere in the middle that 10% of the agreement of the annex have been agreed upon, that parties will enter into the discussion framework. And they say that we shall continue to talk until it is not better defined in the annex, because I am afraid that the negotiators are a bit freed from the risk, and that they will act. Don't make pressure on us. We have this annex. Give us some room. Let us to prepare our public for the implementation. And it seems that there is no room for the preparation of the public, because whoever wanted it was public. If Brussels agreement was transparent in the phase that we have come, it is hermetically closed, and it is very difficult to foresee what shall happen. I am not from the ones who think that transparency is a completely necessary. It's a very difficult question. One part of these agreements should be so that the negotiators should sit in Brussels and not in Ohrid. They have a very strong mandate. It means that people who voted on them, they trust on them. So a part of the agreement is secret as well, but the part of the agreement should be in secret as well. But unfortunately, on the ground, we cannot see that things that, well, they did not communicate about the association. We just heard today from the EU spokesperson any opinion on to what will happen tomorrow when the interim deadline expires, when Kosovo government made itself about the license plates. The Serb list did not think that what was done in Ohrid sufficient enough to go out in the voting, and on the 3rd April we have the potential when we shall see what shall happen and when he shall serve the prison sentence, and it is a breach of the Brussels agreement. These are some violators and they do not make trust, and whatever is going secretly in those negotiations is not known. So it should not be secret, but there is not proof and motions that should indicate that what is done it's going in the right path. And also the statements of the officials are not promising. We have the information that Vucic's visit shall be banned, and nothing shows any mitigation here. When the Brussels agreement was reached, we had some golden time of relationship, at least from the communications that were released in Pristina and in Belgrade, and they were positive. I remember the press conference meeting when Kosovo and Metohija spoke about the cultural heritage of Albanians and the need to respect the other's religion and so on. These are some things that signaled that relations have been improved. And the only thing we can hear recently, when the atmosphere was constructive in the meeting, this is not on their public presentations, and this is why I am skeptical about how things are going on concerning the consequences and awards. And I think with the decision in Ohrid, they should accept the annex as agreed, and EU showed that it is ready to use awards that punishments, and it says that the time for sanctions has long gone. So they should have made pressure at the moment when they discussed annex so that they could have some clear obligations. And then they promised awards. And I think that space acts that the EU, it's not ready to use sanctions, which is quite positive according to the parties in the negotiations, and that the dialogue shall be focused on the potentials. Thank you. Mr. Petsy, are you optimistic when the implementation of this agreement in question, and what are the main challenges, the key challenges?
I don't know in which language to speak, so... Okay.
First of all, I think that the international community, we are speaking of the West here, and I am very convinced that people in Kosovo and all the communities in Kosovo and maybe the people in Serbia do not have time to lose. We have lost a lot of time, and I want to say a fact. that transition in former EU countries is going on for almost 38 years. The Cold War lasted for 48 years. And maybe this parameter applies to understand how much time we have lost dealing with probably issues that we're not supposed to deal with, especially after 1999, and that we have lagged behind in a lot of things, but we have achieved where countries in the region, in this case I am speaking about Kosovo and Serbia, in certain situations to endanger or to risk regional security. But in all these dynamics, and I believe that people and the West understand it, that they do not want to lose unnecessary time in the region, I am afraid that Kurti and Vučić have opposite aims or goals, and they want to lose time, they want to buy time, and they have started the implementation of this agreement not with their goodwill, but as it is said in English, in bad faith. And for me, this is the indicator that makes me not that much optimistic concerning the achievement of the agreement, final agreement. It means its implementation. And if one agreement is implemented, and if it is implemented without goodwill, the political climate, its political climate, shall be heavy to implement this agreement in its entirety. I think that Kosovo and Serbia, their governments respectively, should choose, do they want to belong to the revisionist part of history or to the civilized part that will lead the region as soon as possible towards EU integrations and Euro-Atlantic integrations in the case of Kosovo? Or they shall follow the revisionist part, which for me has an anti-historic character. What do I want to say with this? We have the ambassadors of the two countries, Germany and France. I believe that, to what I know and to what I have read, that enmities between France and Germany could have been much bigger than animosities between Kosovo and Serbia. But they found the momentum, and today the pillars of EU are practically based in these two countries. In France, without France and Germany, EU cannot exist, and without their leadership, it is difficult to go forward. I also think that the task of the current leadership in Kosovo and in Serbia is to make the transition of this big step toward full normalization of relations between each other, and to close this chapter and to pass on a new chapter of relations between two states and two peoples. And if we speak for what it is called the fate, the historical destiny, as it is said in English, if we maintain this civilized part, our fate is that Kosovo and Serbia, as future members of EU, should be allies with each other. And if we think that in this form that we are today, we can go in this direction, I think that it is very difficult, especially considering that considering the vocabulary both in Pristina and Belgrade after the achievement of the agreement, I was a bit more optimistic. Since I want to say another thing, I had observed a lot when we had the Prespa agreement between Prime Minister Zaev and Prime Minister Tsipras of Greece. After that agreement, it is interesting to what I have noticed that they supported each other. Whereas in Kosovo and in Serbia, the opposite is happening. And concerning EU and its mediation role in this respect, I think that the annex is not clear to what it should be, and unclarities in the annex is giving, how to say, space to various interpretations or misinterpretations of the agreement that was reached earlier in Brussels and then in Ohrid. I have another fear here, and that fear is that my fear is that this process which is going this way, it can reflect in the increase of ethnic tensions in Kosovo, since as both the Albanian and the Serb nation have their expectations from this dialogue and from that agreement as well. And if these expectations do not have, how to say, a common denominator of the common life in this country and the peaceful life in this country, then I think that instead of bringing progress, this agreement is possible to return to a boomerang and to cause conflicts because of the mismanagement of expectations. Thank you very much indeed. Thank you, Mr. Pezzi. Before I give the floor to other colleagues, I would like the ambassadors, if they comment on these that were Mr. Pezzi and Ms. Rakic. Andrić, Mr. Pezzi said that it can return as a boomerang. And how do you assess the narrative that comes after the agreement that was reached by Vučić and Kurti? We saw that it doesn't bring some normalization. An example of this is the Prime Minister said that she will not allow the visit to Kosovo to Serbian president, and we have the reply from Belgrade, and we every day have some verbal fights between Belgrade and Pristina.
Yes, first I would say to Ms. Rakic and Mr. Pecci, I understand their healthy skepticism because they are much longer observers of non-functioning of agreements of dialogues than us. I am only here for 2.5 years. But I still, I mean, and of course, I think we are in the business of being optimistic. You know, the glass is half full. Otherwise, we couldn't do our job very well. But as I said, I'm more optimistic because there's a lot of political attention and pressure, the first thing. The second thing is, what is the alternative? The alternative is the road to Europe will be closed for both countries. And third, if Europe doesn't come to the Western Balkans, the citizens will continue to go to Europe. I mean, we know the demographics in every Western Balkan country. I follow the publications of the new social initiative. Young Serbs leave north of Kosovo, or in Kosovo, young Kosovars all leave also for Europe. We need to change that, and that is dependent on the will of political leaders to implement. And if you mention statements like this, you know, I think it's a bit frustrating to always hear statements, what is not possible. You can't do this. Or the leader of Serbia says, you know, paragraph 4 of the agreement is Serbia will not object to Kosovo's membership in any international organization. The next day we hear statements, never UN. Why do you say things when you agree to something? You know, we need a positive trajectory and not utter things which are not possible or red lines, you know. Talk to each other and implement. That's the message, and I think you can be sure that on both sides we are very much engaged to convince stakeholders to be positive.
Thank you. I will just very shortly continue on my comparison with the weather. And just as the weather is nice today, we know that next week or over the weekend it's going to get colder. So in the negotiation, frost can bite too. We are aware of that. There are risks. So we're aware, we know. And I do not want to dwell on the possible negative consequences, but as Jonas just said, it's already enshrined in the document or in the agreement on the 27th February that the path to the EU is open to those who would respect their commitments, and those who will not, they will have to suffer the consequences on their path to the EU. I think, again, there is a wish, I'm sure, in the population, especially in the Serbian majority municipalities, to have their life back to normalcy, no blockades, that the registration of your car would be something easy and you don't need to think 10 times about it, that your diplomas, that your passports, that your IDs are not a problem. I'm sure that it's exactly what the people want to have in the first place, and it's for their leaders to take that into consideration also. I think I will stop here and leave it open for questions.
Dobro. Drage kolege, izvolite. Zajak.
Yes. A question for the ambassador. In some article of Annex it says that Pristina is obliged to realize a certain management level in Serbian association in line with relevant previous agreements that have been signed in Brussels. But those relevant agreements that have been, the envoy of EU, what is according to you relevant? Is it what Belgrade says, that Pristina is obliged to establish the Serb Municipality Association, or what Pristina is saying is relevant, that is a kind of a self-governance for Serb municipalities? According to me, according to some experience that I have I've been following from 1999 the internationals here, there is always another interpretation. What is according to you relevant, and it should be confirmed by the EU envoy? The questions are the articles when they mention that Article 7 and Article 10, when they mention the obligation for the realization of all previous agreements reached. Here you are, Ambassador.
First, we expect out of the discussions that are going to take place, or that will continue taking place, a proposal from Kosovo, as it is stated in the document, in the annex, to launch negotiations on the association. There should be no doubt about that. We're talking about an association, and we're basing ourselves on the previous agreements. Now, I think it would not be methodologically a good way to first try and forever discuss what's the right framework, what's the right parameters. We encourage the government of Kosovo to make a proposal, and then we'll discuss on the basis of this proposal and on the merits of this proposal. So I would not talk in theory about here, that, and that. The message we're giving to the government of Kosovo is that we're encouraging them very strongly to make a concrete proposal, and that would be a concrete step forward that then will be discussed. Rather, I think it's much better than to sort of, in theory, dwell upon what should be, what should not be.
Izvolite.
Yeah, in addition to what Olivier said, I just want to read the 2 sentences from the op-ed of our, of the presidential and chancellor advisors. Kosovo needs to live up to its obligations towards protecting the Serb community, including by taking steps to form an association of Serb majority municipalities and to guarantee a high level of protection to the Serbian religious and heritage side, cultural heritage side. Serbia needs to come to terms with the fact that Kosovo is a neighbor who has a European perspective and its own place in the international community. So now the details need to be hammered out in the upcoming talks, first next Tuesday and then hopefully soon a leaders meeting. And the fact that I said at the beginning, we have now not months between intervals between meetings. There is an urgency, it's decision time, and we want quick progress. But of course, ultimately, it depends on the political will of both stakeholders to implement things. And I'm still much more optimistic than some months before.
Hvala. Jel imamo...
Thank you. Besnik?
Thank you. President Tahiri, Clan Kosovo. I
This-
have 2 questions for ambassadors. The first one is, President of Serbia is saying all the time that he said, as he's saying in the face to Chancellor Scholz and President Macron, that Serbia had its red lines, and it's saying no Kosovo in United Nations and no recognition. So how can the process go further when Vučić is proclaiming that he said so many times in the face to such a powerful leaders as the Chancellor of Germany and the President of France? And the second question is, if Kosovo fulfills its let's say so, criteria coming from this agreement, does it mean that this country has a clear European Union path, and also being member of the organization, like for example, partnership for peace in the NATO and the Council of Europe? Because right now we are hearing that both sides has to fulfill its things that they agreed. But if Kosovo fulfills its side, does it mean that this country can go further with this European Union and other organization perspective? Thank you.
On the issue of red lines and accession to organizations. Again, before we talk about accession, if you read carefully the annex of the 18th of March, there is an expectation from us to the government of Kosovo to come up with a proposal on the association. And that's what we're expecting from them, and that's what we're encouraging them to do. And it has to be very clear. On the accession, on the path to other international organizations, As you all know, Kosovo would like to join the Council of Europe. There is a procedure for that. I'm not going to go into details. Obviously, it is in the interest of Kosovo to succeed, and that's the wish of their government, because it would be a materialization that, as is stated in the documents, Serbia recognizes that Kosovo is a member of the international community. But there would be a great advantage for the normal citizens as well when Kosovo, I mean the Serbs, ordinary citizens, when Kosovo is a member of the Council of Europe, because that would give the possibility to file a complaint by the European Court of Human Rights, which is a very powerful court, which is a court that is respected by all members of the EU, and that would be also that would be key, that would be very important in the future for Kosovo to respect the decisions of the court. So one of the things that I hear when I'm talking with people around here is that maybe the laws of Kosovo are good and well written, but the implementation is not satisfactory. That's exactly what the Court of Human Rights is there for, to check on very concrete cases whether the laws are respected and whether the system is functioning. So the perspective of Kosovo being a member of the Council of Europe is obviously in the interest of Kosovo. It is also in the interest of the citizens of Kosovo, all of them, including the Serbs. On the path towards Euro-Atlantic institutions, we are favorable to that, when it comes to France, and I'm sure Germany is on a very similar line. We recognize a European perspective for Kosovo. The path towards the EU is also a long and technical one, but we're confident that Kosovo could do it. But for this, and I'm sorry to repeat myself, we need Kosovo to respect their commitments, and when it comes to Serbia's accession to European institutions, that would be the same. So also, not just in theory, we wish Kosovo to become a full member of the European institutions. It will take time because it's a difficult process or a long process, but that's our goal. And the very first step is to respect the annex from 18th of March.
Do we have any other question from the colleagues? Yes?
Kosovo Joci, Euronews Albania.
George.
I want to follow a little bit from Besnik's question because Mr. Ambassador didn't say much about what Serbia part said after the agreement in Ohrid. As Besnik mentioned, Mr. Vučić repeated many times that they would not allow Kosovo in UN, and we didn't get any answer about that. You spoke again for the association, that is for the Kosovo part, but how can we go forward if we have this statement from Serbia? Like, there will be obstacles in this and that and that, and how can we expect step forward then?
I mean, again, I also repeat myself, it's not helpful to make statements which are contravening an agreement to which both sides are committed. And in the end, in Brussels, we will talk about implementation of what was agreed and not about statements which were made later. And again, I understand, what Mr. Rakic and Mr. Peci said, the last 10 years, there is a healthy dose of skepticism, also by you media representatives. But, we are at a watershed moment at the moment. And also the geopolitical situation, we want to focus on this progress. And I think the efforts also by in Brussels next Tuesday are exactly to focus on how do we implement it now fast. You know, it's not that one side only implements things and the others not. There are obligations by both sides. You read the whole agreement. Exchange of permanent mission, recognition of state symbols, no objection. So, you know, I wish less focus on statements but on concrete actions. I know it hasn't been, we are not that yet there, but I mean, you know, next Tuesday is the next meeting, and again, we are relatively optimistic that there is progress that can be implemented. Otherwise, the consequences are, you know, we pointed it out. How can you have a way to Europe if the stakeholders are not willing to show good faith and trust building? For Kosovo, one point maybe, I'm here for 2.5 years. I have made, together with my Quint colleagues, we have issued several statements on non-implementation of court decisions. Dechani Monastery. You know, this is an outstanding issue, and that would, in my case, you know, trust building is important, especially to minorities and, you know, also religious minorities. And, you know, you need to implement court decision. It's as simple as that. That is also the way to the Council of Europe. Thank you.
Pa, evo samo bih, da, samo da...
Yes, just to make it clear, we heard a lot of times from the officials that we need the urgency in the implementation of what has been agreed upon. You mentioned that it is the obligation of Pristina to establish the Association of Serb Municipalities. Is there any deadline? What are your expectations? Are months, days, or maybe years in question? And to what degree the Serbian list, which is the strongest political parties in Kosovo, shall slow down that process of establishing the Association of Serbian Municipalities? I think that what we can hear from the representatives of the international community is that they expect it to be by the end of the year. The greatest part of the agreement is to be implemented, and I think that many deadlines have been going on and things are to go in the right direction, but parties have a lot of room in the negotiation process than it is heard. We hear that take something, leave something. It happened as well. In Ohrid, that parties, they left 90% of documents and nothing has happened. So there is more room in negotiation for both parties than it is presented to the public. And that's why they are playing hockey. Concerning Vučić and Serb list in the elections, I cannot say that it shall delay the association, the establishment of the association, because they led the municipality for 10 years and the municipal association of Serbian classes was not established. And I think that it is very important to know where the problem is when the question of the establishment of the Serb association is in question. And its membership should be open. And it is possible to create the association with 6 municipalities in the north. And finally, nobody can say in advance that candidates that shall be selected on the 3rd shall be leading the municipality. It's not good to have such suppositions. For me, all those arguments that deal with the boycott of elections, they do not help. They take away a part of the pressure from Albin Kurti's government. Ambassador, you?
On the last element, the elections, you've seen, I guess, the statement by the Quint recently, the decision of the Serb list not to participate into the elections is regrettable. And I think it is something that, again, ordinary people will lose from. Elections are a cornerstone of democracy. It's the best and the only way to prove your representativity. So I think it would be. We wish they would have taken a different position, and we can only encourage them to reconsider this position.
Yes, just from my side to add, if you don't participate in elections, you can't influence decisions, and then don't complain. They were postponed once, a second chance, again, and that's again regrettable. We expressed that, not only us, the EU, and also the OSCE. Thank you.
I think that the non-participation of listserv in elections in 4 Serb municipalities in the north, it damages more the Serb community. And I think that the Serb community, if we have circumstances in the future for the better democratic life in the north, I know what they used to be like and the relations of the EU about the manner the elections were held in this part of Kosovo. They should ask responsibility from the Serb list, because they shall be responsible for the non-functioning of the institutions there, and the non-functioning of institutions will impact directly the quality of the population in that part of the country. One more question. Sorry, Mr. Ambassador. You are speaking of the implementation of what has been achieved. We haven't heard that you said, as Belgrade asserts, that Pristina is supposed to establish the Association of Serb Municipalities. Pristina is obliged to make steps to protect Serb community. Could you be a bit more precise? Is Pristina obliged to implement Brussels agreement on Serb municipalities, or it's a new process that should go on? I think that the ambassador said clearly that they should, but if you would like to. I had translation as well. Yes, Mr. Ambassador.
I had the feeling I was very clear, but I repeat for you. We expect from the government of Kosovo, as is stated in the, and I'm going to read it in English, as it's stated in the annex. Kosovo launches immediately negotiations within the EU facilitated dialogue on establishing specific arrangements and guarantees to ensure an appropriate level of self-management for the Serbian community in Kosovo in compliance with relevant previous dialogue agreements as determined by the EU facilitator. And in clear text for us, this means association. And I don't have the feeling to reveal a secret here.
One question for all, maybe. You said, Mr. Ambassador, that normally all the obligation is for both sides. But what could happen if, let's say, one side, no matter which, decide to go further and one reject to go further? What's then?
of my favorite answers as a diplomat is if you ask me hypothetical questions, I refuse to answer. So we have, the EU has made it clear that there will be consequences, but we are not working on the hypothesis that that the agreements are not implemented. Both sides have committed to it, and we work on this assumption. And I've seen nobody has seen in Brussels indications that they don't want to implement. We have seen statements which are not helpful, but you know, we are working hard in Brussels, especially Mr. Lajcak and his team, to bring both parties together to start this implementation process. Again, next Tuesday is the first meeting on that to hammer out details. You know, this is accompanied by visits. On Monday, my Western Balkan envoy will come to Pristina again to speak with the Kosovo government. He will go to Belgrade. He will meet also Kosovo Serb community. So there's a constant political dialogue to convince stakeholders just do the right thing.
Pa nisam sigurna da mogu. Ja kažem...
I am not certain, I am not convinced. So consequences will deal only with the way towards Europe. As I see, the way I see the agreement, since they should sit in the negotiations, it's obliging for every leader that wants to join EU. But hypothetically, if one of these leaders considers it's not a place for them, I don't think that we have the fact that that agreement is binding. But none of the parties had declaratively said on that. But let us see. I think that because of the package of the EU, democratic union, it is very difficult to imagine that it shall use sanctions and threats at this phase. I repeat that it is the time for such concrete actions was before the discussions and the agreements on the annex. And now it seems too real. It seems to me that stressing what are the awards or benefits confirms my theory that this process shall be avoided a bit based on benefits. If I can say something in relation to this, I am not the one that can interpret as to what the EU sanctions shall be, because it is EU that decides on them. But to a degree, it is clear. I think that I'm speaking hypothetically. Since I am not a diplomat, I can speak hypothetically. I think that if we exceed the entire measure of tolerance in Brussels, there is a possibility that Kosovo shall be suspending the SSA agreement and the visa issue, and Serbia can be suspended the process of accession in EU. And also there are other instruments such as stopping of financial aid that both countries receive. And even these measures can be combined with the measures of the USA, which can have bigger consequences, especially for Kosovo. I hope that we shall not come to the implementation of sanctions. I am convinced that it shall be the last step of EU after all the diplomatic means have been exhausted. But I hope it will not come to that. But if it happens to come to that, we shall take it because of Serbia's blame. I do not see any benefit that Kosovo can get if this happens, because I do not expect that EU non-recognition countries will change their stand towards Kosovo, even if Serbia spoils this process. And according to me, Kosovo is in a disadvantaged position in Brussels discussions because in the current position of the 5 EU countries, whether we want it or not, they gave only to Serbia for the future of Kosovo and for the interpretation of this agreement. Because if parties have agreed that Kosovo should enter into all international institutions, and if this normalization process is spoiled, then we see here that, in fact, we have to do with this issue. And what concerns me more is that Kosovo's independence is irreversible, but I should be a bit more open here today, even with the French and the German ambassador, because Quint countries are the ones that practically, with their investment in the Western Balkans, be it through NATO or EU, they are maintaining stability and security in the region. They have invested a lot and they are still investing a lot. And the benefits of this huge investment of Quint countries, almost without investing everything from 5 EU countries, they have the commodity in this or that way at this critical geopolitical moment with their stand towards Kosovo. Whether we want it or not to accept it, they shall follow the same stand that Russia maintains. And I think it's a time of reflection, even for Western countries that are investing in Western Balkans, to think about their investment, because the success of their investment, be it material and in the security area, does not depend only from Kosovo and Serbia, but it shall depend a lot from the further stands of these 5 countries of EU. Thank you. Would you like to add something else, Mr. Ambassador?
Very shortly, because my initial statement was on a positive tone, and I would like to, as was already a bit done, conclude also on a positive tone. We've been talking about negative consequences and so on, but if you read through the 11 articles of the agreement of the 27th of February, you see a lot of positive consequences if this is respected, and we hope it will be positive consequences for the population. Again, I would like to stress very much what the ordinary people will get from that in the Serbian community, also in the Albanian community in Kosovo. And then there will be this association that Serbia has asked for very eloquently. There will be a donors meeting soon. There will be, as I said, for the population, the possibility to have their documents, to have their daily life simplified. And I think I'm confident that leaders of both countries will not just look at the diplomatic face-saving or blame game, but they will think about the daily life of their ordinary citizens, and making this agreement, turning it into an implemented reality, has a huge potential for making the life of everybody much simpler.
Hvala. Izvolite.
Just very shortly, I also want to underline, I mean, every political initiative in the last 1.5 years, whether it's the European proposal, which was started by Germany and France, or the Berlin process are designed to bring the Western Balkans into the European realm. And, you know, the whole narrative is positive. Have good neighborly relations, have a common have economic integration, you know, develop political relations, and we invested a lot. I speak, you know, of the EU, our political leaders, and what we expect also is a, let's say, appropriate level of political ambition of the political stakeholders. And that is what we are banking on, and that's why this agreement was reached. And now it has to be implemented, and not in 5 years, but, you know, quite soon, given the geopolitical situation. And we, you know, it's not only the EU and the Quint countries, it's also non-EU countries out, you know, like Norway and Switzerland. Everybody is fully behind this agreement. So I think political stakeholders in both countries need to realize that it's time for a good decision for the citizens of both countries. Thank you.
hvala.
Thank you. So 1 hour elapsed. I would like to thank all of you for your contributions to this important topic to better understand this agreement, this proposal. Thanks to the colleagues that you took part in the discussion. The debate is over. Thank you.